Welcome to another edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace, reporting live here at the Yamaha Artist Services here in New York City as part of this year's 2018 APAP Winter Music Conference. As you know, here on the Pace Report, I like to continue to profile musicians that have a grasp of the past, the present, and the future of the rich tradition of American roots music. And tonight, vibraphonist, educator, as well as composer and band leader, Stefon Harris is performing music from his upcoming record, which is entitled Sonic Creed, which is going to be released on Motema later this year. Now, as you might know, this gentleman has continued the great lineage of great vibe players, ranging from the great Bobby Hutcherson to also the dynamic Gary Burton, as well as Lionel Hampton, just to name the endless few. Tonight you're going to hear music from his upcoming CD. We had a chance to sit down to talk about and break bread about this new recording, as well as talk about his role as a band leader, as well as what the education component has taught him, both as not on the business side, but as well as a musician. So sit back, relax, and enjoy highlights of the brand new music coming from vibraphonist Stefon Harris, live here on the Pace Report, reporting live here at the Yamaha Artist Services here in New York City.
Let's take a trip to the sky. And fly an undiscovered place when we just take a trip to the sky. We'll get by if we just take a trip to the sky. Let's take a trip on the dream. We can do whatever your heart needs. Even these are farewell. Let's take a trip to insane, where love remains. Don't be ashamed to try. All the reasons why, and we just take a trip to the sky. If we just take a trip to the
Stefon, this is the inauguration of the brand new music that's getting ready to come out on Motema Music. You know, the last record was very, very urban, gritty, and I hate to use the word grimy because it was. I mean, it was very, very in the element of the idiom of Black American music. What's different from this project versus your last two projects with Blackout?
I hope that all the music that we make is a reflection of what's happening in our lives at that time. This music that's on this current record, it has a lot more to do with my family It has a lot more to do with my aspirations to create empathy in the world, to connect with other human beings through the lens of the African American experience in the United States.
And that's what you were talking about today during your seminar today, about how music has the ability to reflect the times. And we're living in an era now where the music isn't really kind of reflecting what's going on out here.
Well, the music, that's the purpose of the music. The primary purpose is to create a sense of community, to bring people together. But then historically, the reason that we appreciate great art in the past is because we learned something about who we are. That's why we look back to hieroglyphics. Our job as artists now is to be painters. We're the griots. We're supposed to tell the stories of our families, of our communities in organized sound, so that 500 years from now, the future generations will be able to look back at who we were, how we survived, what we did with our time on the planet, to understand how they came to be.
Tell everybody about the music on this album. What are some of the musical genres that you? Because the last record, one of the songs that stuck out was the whole "Gone," and you had a whole go-go feel with this. How is Blackout interpreting this new music?
Well, every record that we do, we include our rhythm. That's our rhythm. Mark Carey from the last record, he's from D.C. He grew up playing go-go music, so that's always going to be a part of it. My mother's a minister. I grew up in the black church, so the song we just did, Let's Take a Trip to the Sky, it's a tribute to my wife, but you can hear all the gospel influences. So it's always going to be authentic music that's from the heart, that's soulful, and it's always going to be urban because that's my background. That's my people. That's the story that I have to tell.
Playing the vibes. You're playing two different ensembles on and we just saw tonight. Tell me about how both of these sets of instruments are painting or helping to paint the palette of what you're saying musically.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, as people, we're complicated, right? You can never describe one human being as being sensitive alone. You know, you're sensitive, you're aggressive, you're compassionate. We all have empathy. We're complex. So to be able to paint the full spectrum of my emotional outpouring, it's nice to have both those instruments. I find the vibes to be warm and luscious and supportive and very sensitive, very nuanced. Whereas the marimba to me is equally as beautiful, but it's more articulate. It's more aggressive. When I really need to dig deep, if I got some anger that I need to express, which I certainly do based on what's happening in this world right now, I need that organic wood, right? It feels more connected to the earth to me. Whereas if I want to just sing a song of love and let go, I feel like the glassy, warm texture of the vibes provides that for me. And a lot of times I play them both at the same time.
Stefon, you shifted into a band leader, a father, and now an educator now. Explain your role as an educator now, because, I mean, you've played with some very accomplished musicians, and we're going to that in a second. But it seems like the next generation of musicians have to understand this rich heritage of our music.
Wow, it's a interesting challenge, one that I love. First of all, I don't think of it as a transition. I think we are who we are. I think ever since I was in 6th grade, I was an educator. I was always the kid showing everybody else things. Like, I love to share. I grow from figuring out how to articulate complex ideas to other people. So it's in my family. I come from a family of educators. So it was just a matter of time before I settled into a space where I felt it was the right time for me to be at an institution like Manhattan School of Music, where I am right now. Part of the challenge with these institutions is they invited the music in, the notes and the tones, but they didn't actually invite the culture of the music. They didn't invite the people in, the practitioners, Charlie Parkers and, you know, the Dizzy Gillespies. These weren't the people who were allowed to teach. So you end up bringing in the notes and the tones, but not the culture. And it's ultimately, the fact is that music is ultimately an expression of culture. So if you don't have the culture and you just have the notes and tones, what comes out tends to be superficial. It tends to be a shallow imitation of something of great depth. So the challenge for me is to figure out how to include the culture that gave birth to this music, the culture of compassion, the culture of tolerance, of diversity, of uplifting people regardless of whether you're expressing pain or you're expressing joy. This is something that's incredibly unique to this art form. Ultimately, jazz is not a style. Jazz is a platform for people to tell their unique stories.
And it is part of the DNA of America. Just like the blues, just like country and bluegrass, hip hop, this music wasn't imported. This was an expression of a lot of issues that people of color, not just people of color, people of other nationalities, express themselves musically.
That's right. I mean, when you look at the African American experience in this country, you have people who were brought together who may not they didn't speak the same languages necessarily, different religions. You could have had two warring families together on the same plantation. So you had a circumstance where people who may have hated each other elsewhere, maybe loved each other, we don't exactly know, but they had to come together as a community to survive against the oppressor, right? So the only time that you were allowed to express your authentic self during an era like that would have been through music. It would have been on Sunday in church where you were left alone, where you could actually sing your joy and your pain. So over the years, we've lost that element. But that circumstance, I think, could have only happened in the United States. We came through Great Oppression. We're still dealing with Great Oppression. But part of the outcome is this incredible platform that we've created for the world. That oppression exists elsewhere, but whatever confluence of complicated social and economic issues that created the United States also gave birth to this music, which is, I think, the greatest sonic articulation of the ideals of democracy.
Stefon, I have to ask you about Milt Jackson.
Hmm.
You know, Milt Jackson, you had Lionel Hampton, who I think is the king, the undisputed king of the vibes. But Milt Jackson did something very, very, very unique, not just as a musician, but as you, as a person who were playing the vibes. You got into him very late in the game. And let me explain to the viewers how he really kind of took it to a very different level.
Well, I got into jazz very late in the game. I didn't start playing jazz until I got to college. So I grew up in the church hearing that kind of music, but I was playing classical music. My freshman year of college, I got this record called Cannonball Adderley, Things Are Getting Better. And man, I listened to that record nonstop and transcribed every single note that Milt Jackson played on that record. I had never heard a musician be so soulful, so emotionally articulate, and organized sound. He completely blew my mind. And then I started at Eastman School of Music in Rochester, and I transferred because I fell in love with jazz in my freshman year. So I ended up transferring to Manhattan School of Music to be closer to jazz. I couldn't even audition for jazz at that point, so I auditioned for classical music. The first week I was in New York City, 1 block from my apartment, Milt Jackson was playing. So I ran. Somebody came and told me, hey, man, Milt Jackson's around the corner. So I run up to the stage up Grant's Tomb, and I stood there, and it was one of the greatest lessons I've ever had in life, watching him play. It was not just the notes. It wasn't about rhythm. You could tell it was everything. It was the way that he spoke. It was the way that he walked off the stage. You could tell what he was doing will never happen again. And the lesson there was that I don't need to pursue that. That's a lost cause. The lesson there is you need to put all of your passion and your energy towards being as authentic as possible and articulating the voices of your peers, your community, what's happening in the world right now. So I'm incredibly grateful. I would follow Milt around every gig he do in New York. I'd be that kid in the side, call his wife, can I just carry his vibes, anything? And they were just so kind to me. So he set the bar incredibly high, not only as a musician, but the elegance and the grace that he walked through this life with. Just it's incredible, given the circumstances he had to deal with.
And he had two identities. He had modern jazz quartet, and he also had the solo. And he brought a very influential game to the generation of vibe players under him.
Mm-hmm.
Guys like Bobby Hutcherson, God rest his soul,
Mm-hmm.
and guys like Gary Burton.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like he was doing some things mechanically that just can never ever happen again.
Well, I mean, he really made the instrument sound like a human being. You know, before it was kind of a percussion instrument. It was very rhythmic. People used really hard mallets. Milt used a large, soft mallet, slowed the vibrato down so that it's closer to the pace that you would use vibrato with your voice. So he brought soulful, authentic human expression to the vibraphone.
You've played with some outstanding luminaries in the game. Wynton, Joe Henderson, Buster Williams.
Yes.
What was it from the classroom side of playing on the band stage that you learned from these masters that you're applying and taking it to another level now as a band leader?
Well, the classroom, it's about the science of music. So it's learning the relationship of notes. It's just math, right? But the actual application of it, you have to get that from life experience. So you have to be on stage with someone like Buster Williams and mess up and let Buster set you straight. Right? And then not only setting you straight, but it's just as an example. Like, I learned what freedom was artistically from playing with Buster Williams. You could have, I always love to tell the story about the first gig I had with Buster Williams. It was Buster, Lenny White, Jerry Allen on piano. I was still in college, man, just had been playing jazz maybe 3 years or something. I figure I know a rhythm change. Buster calls it a rhythm change in B flat, didn't play a single B flat. Like, all the rules that I had been studying, all that went out the window. And it was ultimately about empathy, about listening, and dealing with whatever was going to happen in the moment. So I'm incredibly grateful to people like Buster and Joe Henderson. I always will be.
That'll do it again for another edition of the Pace Report. Reporting live here at the Yamaha Artist Services here in New York City as part of this year's 2018 APAP Music Winter Conference here in New York City. I'd like to congratulate and thank the legendary Stefon Harris for his time. People, make sure you go out and support Stefon Harris and Blackout's new project, which is coming out later on Motema Records, entitled Sonic Creed. Also, I'd like to personally thank Ms. Karen Kennedy and 24/7 Management for arranging my time here, also the staff and management here at Yamaha, as well as the organizers of this year's APAP Winter Music Conference. As always, please visit my website, www.thepacereport.com, for my weekly column, as well as my past segments. Until next time, remember, if it's in the groove, it'll make you move. Till next time, peace.
the sky.